The Loud House, the second most successful cartoon on Nickelodeon during the mid-2010s, and one that remains popular to this very day. It was such a hit that it even surpassed SpongeBob in viewership every now and then, which is quite the accomplishment considering it's the golden goose of Nickelodeon. Personally, I only heard about The Loud House due to its fandom and how weird it can be. Lots and lots of bizarre fanfics, including one that is, and I can't even begin to wrap my mind around it, over 31 million words long. Folks, that is like 30 times the length of the Bible. Oh, what's that? Christianity? Pretty cool. How about the Loud House fandom? Boom. That's my religion. But unfortunately for the Loud House, its biggest skeleton in its closet is due to the actions of its creator, Chris Savino. A guy who screwed up so bad that it specifically changed how animation companies go about dealing with these types of controversies. Chris had developed a less than savory reputation behind the scenes while working in the industry, one that preceded him for all the wrong reasons, following him between different studios and TV shows for over a decade, until things finally got so bad that he was completely blacklisted from working in animation altogether. What exactly happened here? How could someone go from being a showrunner at the height of their popularity to being considered too toxic to work with in under a year? And why, after all this time, does Nickelodeon still seem to have so much trouble vetting their showrunners? Well, let's find out and discuss what ruined Chris Savino. But real quick, a shout out to our Patreon. Helps a lot. We got some cool perks on there for Bad Movie Night. It's in the link down below. And also a shout out to our sponsor, Helix Sleep. These sponsors help us to pay our editors, our writers, our overall team, so thank you. Folks, it's February, second month of the year and also the shortest. Our little short king of a month. But just because we've got less time in the month of love doesn't mean we have to miss out on plenty of lovely zzz. Am I reading that wrong? Oh, I'm supposed to be making sleeping sounds. Who wrote this shit? And there's no better way to accomplish just that than with a mattress from Helix Sleep. One of the, if not the, best makers of premium mattresses that are custom fit to tailor all of your unique sleeping needs. As always, it's easy to get started with Helix. Get started by taking the Helix Sleep Quiz, so you can get lined up with a mattress that will suit all of your unique sleeping preferences. You can do this yourself or with a loved one if you share your bedtime space with another. For me, I have a girlfriend and a little dachshund dog. I have like 20% of the mattress and they have 80%. It's so unfair. Then, once you've been paired with your mattress-to-be, you may eagerly await its arrival, which is free in the continental USA. Locate your Helix to its desired location, and then easily unpack your mattress. It takes a moment for it to fully unravel itself, but all good things are worth waiting for. And now, a love poem dedicated to my Helix. Oh, my darling Midnight Lux, my muse, my love, my bedtime lust. You are truly meant to be, conforming to my back and knees. Folks, I didn't claim to be Shakespeare. I'm just a stupid man. Their robust lineup of mattresses include the award-winning Luxe and Ultra Premium Elite collections, and the Helix Plus for big and tall sleepers. I'm talking about like the Philadelphia Eagles offensive linemen who are like 6'5" and 350 pounds each. It's insane. Go Birds. There's even the Helix Kids mattress design for the little goblins you've brought into this world. The President's Day sale is live now, and they're offering my viewers an exclusive deal. So, click the link down below in the description box to take advantage of 27% off your next mattress. That's a very unique number, 27. I think it's a deal. Then you can try writing your own love poem for your mattress and see if you can write a better poem than me. Good luck. Thanks again to Helix for partnering up with us for this video. And now, back to the video. Christopher Mason Savino was born on October 2nd, 1971 in Royal Oak, Michigan. Chris grew up loving comic strips and classic Saturday morning cartoons, including his favorites, Looney Tunes, Underdog, and Rocky and Bullwinkle. His childhood actually served as the premise for The Loud House, since he grew up with 9 other siblings, 5 sisters and 4 brothers. God, I cannot imagine what getting ready for school was like for them. Good luck using the bathroom. But the show that seemed to inspire him the most was Mighty Mouse: The New Adventures, a short-lived series with a cult following. Notably, Chris only realized he could study animation as a possible career path during his senior year of high school. After graduation, Chris went to the Detroit Institute of the Arts and eventually got his start in the animation industry at 19. His first job was working as a layout artist for, oh no, Ren and Stimpy. John, we gotta stop meeting like this. Seriously, we really need to stop meeting like this. With these specific circumstances, yeah, the irony is palpable, and it's getting really old. Out of all the people I've covered so far on these scandal deep dives, Chris Savino by far had the most credits to his name. Like, this guy was literally everywhere from the start of the 90s into the early 2010s. Here's some of his most notable credits I found online to really drive this point home. Rocko's Modern Life. He was a designer for the characters, props, and backgrounds for pretty much the entire series. Dexter's Lab. He storyboarded 15 episodes, as well as writing and directing 26 episodes between seasons 3 and 4. Not to mention becoming the show producer after Genndy left. Which personally, I wasn't crazy about that change of direction. I like the old Dexter much more. But it sufficed. The Powerpuff Girls. He provided storyboards for 15 episodes from season 1 to season 6, as well as producing and writing over 25 episodes from season 2 to season 6. Foster's Home. He wrote 6 episodes and was the animation director on 23 episodes between seasons 2 and 5. Man, this next one really threw me for a loop. My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic. He wrote 2 episodes of the first season, including Ghostbusters and Stairmaster, along with Fluttershy's Lullaby from the same episode. But Chris did not stay there for long, as he headed off to the Disney Channel in 2010 to become an executive producer on Kick Buttowski, along with directing 71 episodes of it. So yeah, those are his biggest credits for sure. But there's a few shorts he made and tons of smaller roles he filled on many other shows too. And if I went into all of those, we'd be here all day. But at the very least, we can see he's been at all 3 of the big TV animation studios in LA: Cartoon Network, Disney, and Nickelodeon. As reported in Animation Magazine, Nickelodeon created the Animated Shorts program in 2012 for indie artists to submit animated shorts to the network. The response was so overwhelming, with over 600 submissions, that Nick expanded the requirements for the following year. Starting on January 22nd, 2013, potential showrunners would have to make a pitch deck and a 2-minute short to present their pilot to the studio. And out of the 1,000 submissions Nick had received in 2013, the winning short chosen was The Loud House, created by, you guessed it, Chris Savino. The story centers around Lincoln Loud, an 11-year-old boy living with his family in a Detroit suburb. He's a middle child with some nerdy interest, but Lincoln has to compete for space with his 10 sisters. All right, you ready here? Here we go. Lori, Lenny, Luna, Luann, Len, Lucy, Lana, Lola, Lisa, and Lily. And Steven! Each of the sisters have their own distinct personality, with a lot of the comedy coming from how they interact, getting involved in Lincoln's wacky schemes. Originally, and I did not know this until recently, the characters were developed as rabbits. But Chris was advised to change them into humans instead, to broaden their appeal. Each of the siblings were color-coded to make them look visually distinct, and similar to a classic comic strip. Kinda gives me like Schoolhouse of Rock vibes. During a preview article with Variety, Chris stated, quote, "I wanted the episodes to give you the feeling you get sitting down with the Sunday funnies," end quote. The Loud House went into development for 2 years and premiered on May 2nd, 2016. From the start, The Loud House was a smash hit for Nickelodeon. Within just a few weeks of premiering, it became the top-rated animated kids show on any network, with nearly 2.2 million viewers for the first few episodes. And yeah, this figure got them greenlit for a second season on May 25th, 2016. Nick was also embracing a new form of marketing for the show geared towards younger audiences. This involved creating a ton of online content for them to check out. Now pull out their phones and do little Loud House TikTok dances. God, I'm old. Exclusive videos and behind-the-scenes footage on the Nick app, a Facebook page, and even a comic series posted on Instagram. It's since been taken down, but the concept alone was kind of cool. Nick also launched a production blog on Tumblr to build up the hype between seasons. It included interviews with the crew members, animatics, podcasts, and tons of other interactive elements to check out. Admittedly, some members of the Loud House fandom got a little too weird with the shipping of the characters of the show, and I'll just leave it at that. The Loud House got incredibly close to matching SpongeBob's popularity, which is really saying something. New episodes of The Loud House averaged 950,000 viewers for their target demographic, with SpongeBob hitting around 984,000 per episode. Now, I obviously did not grow up watching this show, and longtime fans know I was busier doing much more manly things like watching My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. But those kinds of numbers for Loud House are very impressive. It's no wonder why Nickelodeon banked on the Loud House so much. In a first for the network, the Loud House was nominated for 2 GLAAD Awards for their positive depictions of a same-sex interracial couple. Lincoln's best friend, Clyde McBride, has 2 loving but overprotective dads named Howard and Harold. To this day, the Loud House still holds the most GLAAD nominations for Outstanding Kids and Family Programming since the category was created in 2018. But their most prestigious award win was a 2019 Daytime Emmy for Outstanding Writing and an Animated Production. Things just kept ramping up for the Loud House, with a 3rd season renewal announced on October 19, 2016. But ironically, this announcement date would change everything. Because exactly 1 year later in 2017, it would be the exact same day that Chris Savino was fired from Nickelodeon. To many of his targets, it would be long overdue karma for what he had been getting away with behind closed doors for far too long. Okay, so we've addressed the highs. Now let's get into the downfall itself. I'll talk about the allegations in a bit, but first, I think the timing of all this incident is an especially critical thing to bring up too. So in case you don't recall, public awareness of rampant sexual harassment in the workplace was at an all-time high in October 2017. It wasn't just a problem in Hollywood, but the most highly publicized cases came from there, specifically with Harvey Weinstein being the first major case to capture the public's attention at large. Suddenly, people well known for being predators inside the industry were getting publicly canceled, losing the protection they had taken for granted from major studios. They finally had to deal with the consequences once the breaking news response became too overwhelming for the studios to ignore. During this chaos, a private Facebook group was created by a community of female animators. They had united over their shared frustrations of sexism in the workplace. One of the first community posts was from storyboard artist Cheyenne Curtis. She vented to them about a predatory guy who tried to extort sexual favors from her in exchange for an animation mentorship when she was 22. And without her even naming them.
I was around 22 when it first happened and desperately trying to break into the animation industry. He followed me on LinkedIn and through email and everything. He was fine, but meeting him in person, it escalated.
Many of the commenters instantly knew exactly who she was talking about, because they too had a similar experience. These animators had been forced to repress their stories of harassment and abuse for years. The accusations against Chris Savino had been piling up, and eventually, something was going to give. Now that shit-stained Harvey Weinstein was being taken to task, they had an audience that was now socially aware enough to actually hear them out. Finally, the survivors had a collective voice and numbers, and a traceable pattern of abusive behavior, all coming from the same source. On October 17, 2017, the Chris Savino scandal broke as an exclusive headline for Cartoon Brew, with Chris being put on immediate leave of absence after a dozen employees had accused him of sexual harassment. This article spread like wildfire online. Some of the allegations involved came from artists all over the industry, but they all seem to have a very similar experience with him. One anonymous source Cartoon Brew interviewed stated, quote, "I met him at Disney Channel while he was directing his show Kick Buttowski. The first time, he was very nice to me. Then he got my cell phone number, and he kept in contact with me. At that time, I was 22 years old. One night, he started to text me drunkenly, asking me to prepare myself an alcoholic drink, giving me some recipes and having fun conversation about it. So it was very weird for me. Then he sent me an alien emoji with the splash emoji and asked me for nude pictures. Another night, he sent me a picture of his and told me a dirty secret about how Then he started harassing me for years, telling me he had an open relationship with his wife. So I started to feel very uncomfortable. One day, I went back to Disney to visit one of my dearest friends. Chris saw me and shouted at me, asking why I hadn't told him I would be at the studio. He showed some jealousy about that situation. Then, years passed, and I visited Nickelodeon to join one of my friends for lunch. He learned I was in town and started asking me again by text why I never visited him, and being so annoying and aggressive. He also asked me to hook up with him before I left LA, and told me if I would do inappropriate things with him, he would give me a freelance job as well. I had an opportunity to work at Nickelodeon a long time ago, and I did not take the job because I knew he would be inside the studio. We should never allow people to do this stuff again inside a place where there are a lot of women trying to come up in the industry." End quote. The impact was palpable between different rungs of the creative totem pole. Some of the targets chose to stay anonymous, either due to ongoing investigations with HR or for their own safety. But one of them went public immediately, namely animation director Anne Walker Farrell. She's best known for her work as the lead animator for seasons 1 through 4 of BoJack Horseman, and shared her story through a series of tweets posted on October 18th. During a later interview with BuzzFeed News, she expanded on how long Chris's behavior had gone unchecked after having her own incident with him 15 years prior. Quote, "I was furious that he was still doing this to other women. It was this period of 48 hours, this storm. I went from, hey, here's the event in the distant past that happened. I think I was one of the only ones. I feel kind of crappy about it, to, oh my god, we're an army." End quote. The floodgates were open, with new horror stories coming to light on a daily basis. Many of them all tended to have the same pattern. Chris would target a new hire or younger woman looking for mentorship, with his behavior quickly shifting into demanding sexual favors for new opportunities. Understandably, this unhealthy power dynamic greatly impacted the survivors from speaking out. There was a very real risk of retaliation or being blacklisted from an already small industry. And it sounds like Chris knew that and took advantage of it by using his influence against them. Another incident reported to Cartoon Brew followed this pattern, stating, quote, "This took place about 4 years ago. Chris was working with the development program at Nickelodeon. A woman close to me had a project that was being developed under his supervision. He got her personal contact information under the guise of helping her develop the project off hours. He presented himself as a mentor. He then proceeded to send her unwanted text messages that were lewd and sexual in nature on more than one occasion. When she turned down his advances, her development project was let go. He is a classic case of a predatory male using his status and power over a female subordinate. As with most victims, she was worried of how speaking out against him would affect her career, and no action was ever taken." End quote. Eventually, things reached a boiling point with the LA animation community, demanding action from the studio higher-ups. So while many of these allegations against Chris have been happening for well over a decade, the studio actually did something about it relatively quickly, due to the Weinstein effect. As a result of the backlash, Chris was officially fired from Nickelodeon on Thursday, October 19th, 2017. Nick's parent company, Viacom, did exactly what you'd expect, and put out a vague statement that had stock public relations response written all over it. As published in Variety, their statement reads, quote, Chris Savino is no longer working with Nickelodeon, who take allegations of misconduct very seriously, and we are committed to fostering a safe and professional workplace environment that is free of harassment or other kinds of inappropriate conduct. End quote. There was also an internal memo that went out to Nick employees and ended up being shared in industry trade magazines. While I'm guessing their message was intended to be comforting, it comes across as non-committal and victim-blaming. Quote, in the current climate, it feels necessary to say that if you should encounter an uncomfortable situation at work or witness one, you are safe to speak up. If you hear something and are unsure of what to do, you are safe to tell your supervisor or HR. If you need help in any way, you are safe to ask for it. End quote. Yeah, that's corporate speak for, it's not our problem until you get the press involved. A lot of office workers probably know this already. But functionally, human resources is there to protect the company first. It usually ends up as the last resort for employees who are having conflicts at work. Well, that or leaving a job altogether. Frankly, if a studio feels the need to make a statement to the staff like this only after a big public scandal, then yeesh. Chances are this kind of conduct has been a company-wide problem behind closed doors for a long-ass time. And they're only now doing something about it because the bad publicity is overwhelming. Nickelodeon was far from the only studio having these kinds of issues, but how they handled it was going to set a precedent for the entire LA animation scene. The real kicker was when an open letter got sent out to all the major animation studio executives on Thursday, October 19th, 2017, the exact same day that Chris was fired from Nick. This letter wasn't just signed by his victims either. It had over 200 signatures on it from people working in animation demanding that they take sexual harassment in the workplace seriously. The demands they listed were simple. 1. Each studio needs to lay out clear policies for dealing with sexual harassment and strictly enforces them by investigating and following through on reports. 2. The Animation Guild should add language to their constitution to address anti-harassment and discrimination violations for members. And 3. Asking male coworkers to stop making excuses for sexist behavior in the workplace and to actually stand up for their female colleagues. That's it. That's literally all they were asking for. There is nothing unreasonable here. It's the kind of thing where you can't believe that it wasn't already a standard policy, at least as far as larger studios go. But hey, here we are. And that was the energy of their closing statements too. The people involved in creating the open letter were fed up. They were exhausted and just wanted to be treated like equals. Quote, it has not been easy for us to share our stories with each other. Many of us were afraid because our victimizers are powerful or well-liked. Others were worried that if they came forward, it would affect their careers. Some of us have come forward in the past, only to have our concerns brushed aside, or for our supervisors to tell us he's just from a different era. All of us are saddened and disheartened to hear how widespread the problem of sexual harassment still is in the animation industry, and how many of our friends had been suffering in secret. It is with this in mind that we resolve to do everything we can to prevent anyone else from being victimized. We are united in our mission to wipe out sexual harassment in the animation industry, and we will no longer be silent. End quote. The letter was published in full on October 20th, 2017, through publications like The Hollywood Reporter, with all the signed names included. There are some prominent animation figures who signed it, like Steven Universe creator Rebecca Sugar and Lauren Faust, the creator of My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. But guess who also signed it? Yeah, that's right, Julia Vickerman, the creator of 12 Forever, and Lindsay Carrozza, Carl's now ex-wife. Yes, I swear this is real. It is on the article itself, clear as day, and with hindsight, it's incredibly ironic. Jokes aside, I'm certain they've put up with some weird sexist crap too. But yeah, sometimes reality really is stranger than fiction. The following week on Tuesday, October 24th, 2017, Chris released a public apology on his personal Facebook page. It reads, quote, I am deeply sorry and I am ashamed. Although it was never my intention, I now understand that the impact of my actions and communications created an uncomfortable environment. At every stage of my career, I've sought to uplift my colleagues and cultivate a culture of respect. In this objective, I have failed. I should have known better. I should have acted better. And this has been a difficult but valuable lesson. I have nothing but the deepest respect for the bravery of the women who have spoken out, trying to create an environment in which they can thrive and reach their fullest potential. Sincerely, Chris. Okay, so obviously this isn't anywhere close to an actual apology. The entire thing reads more as, Nickelodeon demanded I make some kind of public statement to cover their asses in the press, and this is me doing that in the least accountable way possible. And I want to put some of the language used in this thing under a microscope. Because it's not just what he says that is so lackluster, it's the way he says it that shows what he really means. Quote, although it was never my intention, I now understand that the impact of my actions and communications created an uncomfortable environment. Well, that's weird, because I'm pretty sure the women he went after made it abundantly clear they did not appreciate the way he was treating them and asked him to stop. Unless, of course, they felt so unsafe interacting with him that they stayed quiet out of fear of retaliation and instead found someone they trusted to confide in. So that, never my intention line is pure bullcrap. You can unintentionally step on someone's foot in a movie theater, but your actions have still hurt someone. And apologizing for something that minor is just common courtesy. The way that this was worded feels like a weird non-apology. The impact of your actions on others is what really matters, because it affects them too. So if you're actually going to apologize, don't hide behind qualifiers like that. Own it. Be sincere, stop doing it, and move on. Oh yeah, this next line pisses me off too. Quote, I have nothing but the deepest respect for the bravery of the women who have spoken out, trying to create an environment in which they can thrive and reach their fullest potential. End quote. For Chris to continue harassing his female coworkers, even when they did whatever they could to completely avoid him, shows me one of two things. A, he completely lacked any self-awareness whatsoever, which I doubt. Or B, he knew exactly what he was doing, did it anyway because he thought he could get away with it, and couldn't care less about how his behavior would affect them as people. Either way, yikes.
Stop it. Get some help.
Success is a hell of a drug. And if you get to a certain level of fame for creating the second highest rated TV show on a network, I could definitely see how that power could go to your head, even if it is for a cartoon. But it does not mean you're untouchable. And if you treat enough people like crap, they'll remember it and warn others to stay away from you. Or worse, they'll organize. From the looks of it, there were enough working artists who felt so uncomfortable being around Chris that they wanted him kicked out of the animation industry completely. Not just for what he did, but to collectively send a message that they were sick and tired of people like him. Abusers being sheltered from consequences and making their work environment more toxic than it needed to be. Him getting fired from Nickelodeon wasn't going to cut it, as any other studio could have given him a counter-offered job after the smoke cleared.
Then Cartoon Brew put out an article and that forced Nickelodeon's hand and he was fired.
There was this huge anxiety that he was just going to get hired somewhere else.
People do terrible things and then they just get to keep working.
And the statute of limitations for sexual harassment in California is so small, we could not even legally do anything with that.
Instead, the woman involved in the open letter had to act quickly and took their case to the local Animation Guild trade union in LA. Up to that point, there hadn't been a legal case of removing someone from the guild due to sexual harassment. Notably, their local 839 branch didn't even have language or rules in place for addressing sexual harassment or discrimination claims. This is a huge red flag, obviously. So how exactly were they going to do this? First, they needed to find a restriction within the guild constitution that would be the closest to addressing Chris's behavior. They went with disloyalty to this local guild and/or disloyalty to fellow members, as his actions were a betrayal by making fellow guild members feel unsafe. Next, they had to create a sworn affidavit, or a written statement that would be used under oath verifying their claims, that had to be notarized. Megan Nicole Dong, the future creator of Centaur World, drafted the affidavit with 93 different members signing it. They tried to get it done at a UPS store, but so many people showed up that they got kicked out. Instead, they called a mobile notary who met up with them in a Chuck E. Cheese parking lot to certify it. Once the signatures were done being notarized, they pleaded their case. However, the day before the trial was supposed to be held, Chris agreed to a guilty plea bargain deal with the guild. Thanks to a lousy loophole, he could only be suspended and not expelled from the union. This was not ideal, but he was sentenced to the following punishments: a year suspension from the Animation Guild, mandatory payment of $5,000 to be donated to a charity of their choice, complete 40 hours of community service with a charity of their choice, and finally, take a certified course in sexual harassment training along with mandatory counseling. So instead of a trial, the guild had a hearing of 11 different witnesses who all had very similar experiences of being targeted by Chris Savino. One of my favorite anecdotes from the hearing came from this BuzzFeed news article titled, quote, "I'm sorry is not enough," by Ariane Lang. The article reads, quote, "After a few hours of testimony, a member of the trial board said it was time for a break. As the 11 women briefly conferred, Savino said they should all keep going because he thought they had excellent momentum going. And Walker Farrell turned to him and said, 'Shut up,' and told the trial board they could use a break." Testify supporter Aminder Dalival said, quote, "It was kind of this comedic moment I needed. I can't imagine anyone else saying, 'We're making great momentum' at their own sexual harassment trial," end quote. Well, okay, maybe he really doesn't have any self-awareness, and it somehow took a massive crowd of women telling him he sucks to break through that delusion. With that, the hearing ended and the animation studios in LA were notified that Chris Savino had finally gotten a taste of his own medicine. His year-long suspension began on April 7th, 2018. But as we know now, his distance from the animation industry would last substantially longer. So what exactly happened to the Loud House as a show afterwards? Well, just like SpongeBob, Nick finally took every opportunity they had to expand the Loud House as a media property. As soon as the creator wasn't involved with managing it any longer. Oh, Steven Hillenburg, we miss you. The Loud House was still a very valuable property for Nickelodeon, and they had no intention of letting it go due to the scandal. They retained the rights to the show independent of the creator, and brought on a new series director to replace Chris pretty much immediately. His replacement was Kyle Marshall, a storyboard artist supervisor who suddenly had to take on the lion's share of producing and directing for the hit series. Nick launched an array of Loud House spin-offs, specials, games, media tie-ins, all of the stuff you would expect from one of their most popular franchises. Most notably, these spin-offs included the Casa Grandes, which aired from October 2019 to August 2021. There was also a live-action movie, a live-action series, and 3 animated TV movies. So yeah, a lot. Now, there are Loud House fans who are still pretty vocal online about the show's quality dropping substantially after Chris was fired. And while that's not shocking to hear, it's not going to change anytime soon. After the whirlwind of new developments ended, the sexual harassment case against Chris found an entirely new audience on late-night TV. On March 13th, 2019, an animated sequence detailing the events of Chris's cancellation was featured on Full Frontal with Samantha Bee. Those were the clips I had to use for context regarding the trial, as that kind of information wasn't otherwise available to the public before it aired. At the very least, people who wouldn't have otherwise heard about the scandal could now see just how far these women had to go to get any sense of justice in Hollywood.
You mess with someone's friends and they'll fuck you up, you know?
Okay, so what happened to Chris then? Well, he spent the following 2 months after being fired reflecting on his actions and figuring out what to do next. Looking for guidance, Chris focused his attention on becoming a born-again Christian. Now, he wasn't raised in a religious household, but the structure and community aspect seemed to be what he needed to try to get his life back on track. Later, Chris was interviewed on October 1st, 2019, by a fringe Christian website called The Daily Renegade, owned by Josh Peck. No, not the one from Drake and Josh. Totally different guy. I wish it was, though. Anyway, during the lengthy interview, Chris explains what drew him to the church was to make sense of where his life ended up, and how during his time in the animation industry, he gradually became an addict for alcohol, work, and attention from his female coworkers. Quote, "Although I was happily married, I continued to seek attention from other women. I found myself having, what I believe to be mutual, conversations of an inappropriate nature through text and messaging, which eventually led to an affair that lasted nearly 2 years. In the fall of 2017, at the height of my career, and at an emotionally heated but understandable time in our society, those selfish choices led me to losing my job, my show, my career, my wife, my kids, my home, most of my friends, and all of my career-long colleagues. But my addictions were not the cause of my downfall. I had choices, and, as a married man, I chose poorly. I take full responsibility for those choices and my personal role in the outcome." End quote. Chris goes on to detail the exact moment he got his wake-up call to take getting help seriously. Quote, "In early 2018, I was sitting alone in my apartment, contemplating the circumstances of my life. What would I do? How does one start over? How would I provide for my family? But at the same time, I also asked myself, why had I made the kinds of choices I did? Why did I choose the short-term fixes of addiction? Why, when I had it all, did I feel completely empty? What was I missing? I suddenly asked myself a question that I never thought I would ever ask. Was God missing from my life? The question nagged at me for days, and I did a little research online. I didn't know where to begin. Finally, I took a risk and reached out to a few friends whom I knew were Christians and asked for help." End quote. Chris was baptized on May 6, 2018, and has been diligently going to church ever since. He tried to get an indie animated show called Busted Bible Stories funded on Lure, a streaming service with a Kickstarter element for viewers to fund the shows they wanted to see. But as far as I can tell, the campaign did not take off, and the only thing left from it is the concept trailer on YouTube.
Remember, just because we take the Bible seriously doesn't mean we can't have a laugh along the way.
Now, I want to make something clear. I do not have a problem with someone turning to organized religion for guidance during a personal crisis. People do that all the time after traumatic experiences like losing a loved one or surviving a natural disaster or trying to get past an addiction. That's fine. That is totally acceptable, and it's good to get help. I think my issue here, though, is that I would have believed him if he had taken that kind of spiritual initiative before the public cancellation happened. And given his decades-long track record, I don't blame anyone for being suspicious about this development. You know, it kind of happens in Hollywood all the time. That Russell Brand guy, he was a crazy dude, and then he was like, no, I'm Christian. And it's like, okay, sure. Is this a PR thing, or do you actually believe in the teachings of Christ? What is it? Who can say? And for Chris, if he's sincerely learning from his mistakes, applying those life lessons from the Bible, and doing what he can to be a better person, then fine, that's good. You have to start from somewhere when you're at rock bottom. But if he isn't being honest about turning over a new leaf, then he has no one to blame but himself. One way or another, he is not going to get back to the same career highs he had before with the Loud House. so hopefully he's made his peace with that in some way. But the main thing I care about the most is that he stops harassing women for good. Independent of religion, Chris Savino pivoted into becoming an author in late 2019. His first book was a children's novel titled Cole, a cautionary tale, that he self-published through Amazon. He also released a graphic novel for Bigfoot and Gray, which was based on an animated short he wrote from 2013. After that, Savino released his first non-fiction book that applied his knowledge of animation production into a guidebook. It was called Writing Cartoons in 4 Acts, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Midpoint. He also made a Sunday comic strip, Four Brothers, F-O-R, which he posted on his website and on Instagram, but it was strictly used for work promotion. There's no personal post with selfies, life experiences, or trips, at least not that I could find. It doesn't seem like it's been regularly updated since February 22nd, 2022. Now, I know this is kind of a weird place to cap things off before the outro, but I just don't know what to say now. It really is just surreal to see someone go from being an absolute powerhouse in the world of animation. Someone who had it all, who had a cartoon that could compete with SpongeBob, and then having to start from square one all over again. And for what? Honestly, I had a hell of a time finding much of anything about Chris before he was canceled. Most of it seems like it's been scrubbed from the internet, or he didn't give interviews that much. Overall, kind of cryptic and hard to say. It's just a damn shame to see a show like The Loud House be pulled down by its creators' actions. Because I have the ability to divorce art from the artist, but sometimes it's really, really hard, and that is the case here with Chris, unfortunately. So, in conclusion, what can we learn from Chris's story? Have things gotten any better in the animation industry when it comes to sexual harassment and actually dealing with predatory showrunners? Yes and no. Job stability has only gotten worse since then because I guess animators haven't suffered enough lately. But hey, that's a discussion for another time. The animation industry is still largely seen as a boys' club in the US. Women still only make up between 20 to 40% of professional roles, with even fewer major positions like directing and producing. Now, things have very gradually changed since then, with more animated series being created by women and gender non-conforming showrunners. But it's been a pretty slow uphill process. So if it feels like there's a lot more animated series being made for girls, women, minorities, and queer audiences these days, that's because there is. It only feels like a lot at once because they've been gatekept out of attaining those positions for decades. But it shouldn't take something this gross and monumental happening to make that kind of change possible. What sucks so much about this whole situation is that workplace sexual harassment was only taken seriously once an abusive asshole like Harvey Weinstein was put to task. Somehow, this pathetic bozo, who will hopefully die in prison this year, if we're lucky, was the straw that broke the camel's back for every subset of the entertainment industry. This news story breaking was what brought enough bad press to get Chris Savino kicked out of the industry he took advantage of, in more ways than one. So while I'm happy Chris got the book thrown at him, I'm more disgusted knowing that this case realistically would have been completely ignored if it happened during any other time period. How pathetic is it that the same levels of abuse can go unchecked, even in a relatively insulated world like the animation industry? Nickelodeon specifically has had some seriously questionable judgment when it comes to backing showrunners. Yeah, I know, no studio is perfect, obviously. But the scandal with Chris was actively going on as The Loud House was airing new episodes. He was also the first domino to drop that would have long-lasting ripple effects for Nick as a company. Within 6 months of Savino's firing, the abuse allegations for both Dan Schneider and John Kay came out publicly. This resulted in Nickelodeon not renewing their longtime contract with Schneider's Bakery, and eventually led to the highly publicized documentary Quiet on Set. As for John, He was outed as a sexual predator that groomed teenage girls who started off as fans and ended up working at Spumco. I go a lot further into that mess in my What Ruined Ren and Stimpy video. But yeah, Nickelodeon had a lot of bad optics to deal with at once. I mean, could you imagine if this kind of behavior plagued an animation company from the very top? Like somehow, maybe the creative head of a prominent and highly respected studio was known internally for being a creepy weirdo? Maybe even to the point it got him removed from his position? Like that would be insane, right? Right? Oh yeah. Well, I guess you're next.